Hey there, Reverend Sully, Eric O'Sullivan, ordained on the internet. The caveat, as always, please do not burn your hands holding on to my hot takes. If you do, well, that's on you, pal, or gal, or anywhere in the great spectrum of humanity you reside in and identify with. Ha! There we go. It's time for... What is it time for? It's time for the Sci-Fi Book of the Week. Dun, dun, dun. Yes, indeed, we do the Book of the Week here at Reverend Sully's station. And I wonder what it could be. Well, it's science fiction. And I love science fiction. I love good science fiction. And today we're going to be covering something that may have gone under your radar. It's by one of the masters of the genre, a prolific science fiction writer of the Golden and Silver Age, more so the Silver Age, and it's Arthur C. Clarke. And today we're going over 3001, The Final Odyssey. Did you even know there was a 3001, The Final Odyssey? Well, did you know that there was a third Odyssey called 2061, Odyssey 3? Because you might have heard of this 2010, Odyssey 2. You most definitely probably have heard of 2001, A Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke. And what I don't have on me is my old copy of The Sentinel by Arthur C. Clarke, which was a 1983 anthology of short stories of his, and included was The Sentinel, which was, I believe, a 1965 short story he wrote in a competition. And in 1948, he wrote The Sentinel for a BBC competition. The story was rejected, and it was the basis for 2001: A Space Odyssey. I remember back before the internet, we had to find out things through grokking our pop culture with inhaling books and finding out this knowledge on our own. So knowing, that was a snag. Like, oh, really? 2001: A Space Odyssey was inspired by this short story. So I got it just for that short story, and it contained a whole bunch of other short stories that just turned me on to Arthur C. Clarke, because he used relativistic motion and physics and real space travel. It was the first time I ever wrap my head around how absolutely boring and slow space travel would actually be, and that it's about math, and it's about finding orbits, and it's about this and that, and I got such an appreciation for grounded sci-fi, like science reality in sci-fi. So there are cute things in science fiction and fantasies, such as FTL, faster than light. Well, you need it in order to tell stories set over fantastic lengths of actual distance, and distance equals time, and how to justify the human experience in that frame of time. There's one really good short story in Sentinel that I'm reminded of, and it was about the first interstellar voyagers were about to arrive and come out of their cryo sleep. But the time they got there, humanity had been there for hundreds of years, because humanity found a way around the speed of light. They found it, whatever their FTL was. And the three astronauts were, peculiarities. They were literally throwbacks to a caveman day. They had to be sequestered in their own housing units, and I don't think their wives slept with them much, because their natural body odor was so repulsive to the sensibility, to the senses and sensibilities of the future people. But the question came up: why didn't you just, get us? And they just had some blithe answer of, "Oh, you were going to make it there, and anyway, and we decided to have a celebration," and that was cute. But that same notion of Man Out of Time takes place in 3001, Final Odyssey. Just want to say, I've been a big fan all my life. Watching this movie, it would come on maybe once or every year or so growing up. It would be, something special. I think even once, I might recall this, that it was shown on Channel 2, the PBS, so its radio affiliate, played the background music and audio track on as a simulcast. Correct me if I'm wrong. I might be. This is that's just memory. And also, this movie came out in 1984. I remember seeing this as a kid and enjoying it. This movie is actually pretty interesting as a relic. It's set in a 2010 where there's still the Soviet Union. So, but I basically actually got this movie because of Helen Mirren. I love Helen Mirren. I love you, Helen Mirren. I do too. Yes. And down with your crush, old creepy man. So, the Sentinel got me into reading Arthur Clarke. And, of course, I went and got 2001: A Space Odyssey, which was co-written with Stanley Kubrick as a novel, because there was no 2001: A Space Odyssey. It was basically something they came up with to write the screenplay for the movie. Before that, there was just the idea and the Sentinel. And so the Monolith and the Sentinel is a lot different visually than the Monolith that we get here in this, let's call it universe, in this interpretation. The Monolith and the Sentinel is like crusted with jewels and things, but it's still the same thing about someone buried this, and it's sending a signal, and we will get out there and we will find out who sent this invitation. And yet it follows its own continuity. It shifts the years a bit too as it goes along to kind of make sense of the march of time as well. I mean, 3001: A Space Odyssey was written in... When was it written? It's a 1997 science fiction novel by Arthur C. Clarke. It was his last out of all of his works, of his prolific works. He passed away in 2008, 11 years after this publication. But this 3001 Final Odyssey is his last book ever. And it reminds me... I like it for a couple of reasons. Not because of its narrative, not because of its story. I like it because it takes... Clarke gets very creative in the applications of technology and human industry. But also, I think there comes a time in every writer's life in their series which they put down a manifesto. I saw this in let me get that pen. And I saw this in Frank Herbert's Dune series. I love the Dune books, all 6 original Dune books. Yet in number 4, in God Emperor of Dune, it's like Herbert smacks us down with his manifesto of how he thinks the future would be best, and it's really interesting. It's out there. If you follow any science, leave a comment in the comment section, please. What prolific sci-fi authors have you seen have thrown out their manifesto? I mean, like, what would be Vonnegut's manifesto? What would be Bradbury's manifesto? What would be Philip K. Dick's, Ursula K. Le Guin's? I think that I'm pretty darn sure that Octavia E. Butler's manifestos can be found in the parable books, the parable of the sower and the parable of the gifts. Those are just harrowing books, but I'll make I'll make that claim. But in 3001, what happens is Frank Poole, the astronaut who dies, who gets literally murdered, the first astronaut to get murdered by Hal. Out of the 4 astronauts Hal murdered, Frank Poole was the astronaut co-pilot to the Discovery, along with Dave Hallman here, and he was the one that got sent into space, and Dave had to let drift into space and couldn't bring his body back. This body of Frank Poole is found in 3001, somewhere around the orbit of what used to be Jupiter. And because we all remember in 2010, Jupiter explodes and becomes a second sun. And in the Jupiter orbits, the second sun now heats up Europa. In Europa is where new life will blossom. And the message left by the aliens was all these planets are yours except for Europa. Make no landings there. 2061 is what happens when we screw up and we accidentally crash land on Europa. And what's it going to take to get these people back? And did we interrupt some kind of peace with the aliens, which gets concluded in 3001, story-wise. But the best parts of 3001, a Final Odyssey, has to be, for me, the first time I was legitimately exposed to the concept of the space elevator. A space elevator is made of super strong materials and connects. It's a tether from orbit to the land. On the space elevator, you can put a simple railway system, and you can cargo things up and down into low orbit, higher orbit from the surface without using chemical rockets anymore. Chemical rockets are very harmful to the environment. I read this book about an introduction to energy, and it's how it's made, how it's kept, how it's stored. And there are 3 things in this planet which use up the most energy per effort for anything, and it's a rocket ship, like a literal rocket booster to send payload into lower high orbit, a jet ski, and commercial airplanes, any airplane, just the ratio of energy to its it's how it's produced and how it's expended, and also chemical rockets. These have an impact on the environment. If you believe in global warming and climate change, I simply do. I think the writing's on the wall. You don't need to be a weatherman to know which way the wind blows. Bob Dylan. But that's happening. And also these fossil fuels, and these are limited resources. And how to break your dependence on that resource, which causes pollution, and retrieving it and expending it. Now we have an orbital elevator, a literal tether, and it might take a few days to get up there on a train, but it's run by solar energy. There are no clouds. You just have solar collectors. And that's how it's going to get done. And this, but the space elevator is made out of materials that have yet to be developed, or because of 2010, with Jupiter going slightly nova and creating a second stellar object we call Lucifer, the second sun, the light bringer. That Jupiter's core collapsed and was compressed into a basically a planet-sized diamond, which eventually was found in a Jovian ellipse around Lucifer. And that by discovering these huge asteroids of pure diamond, that there was such an abundance of diamond that diamond became very commonplace, and it became very easy to make super strong materials, and that the space elevator was basically made out of diamond. And because it's a commonplace, common material, and you can finally build something so super strong as to support, to be feasible. And that the space elevator for me is just, that is the way to stay in space. I've recently read Kim Stanley Robinson's Mars series, Red Mars, Green Mars, Blue Mars, and there was 2 attempts at space elevators on Mars, and I love that kind of level of science in my science fiction. That it's only like 50 kilometers per hour to get off of Mars. I mean, Mars has a much lower gravity, so you could actually build a space elevator on Mars with pretty much existing technology. He fudged a few things like diamond inlaid cables, here and there, which could be done. I mean, super strong materials are just, they're one of the most fascinating things of the future that we live in, and we're going to need these super strong materials to get up into space and to stay in space. But they found, Frank Poole's body floating in space, and they brought it back to life with the technology they have. He was simply frozen in time, literally. So he's much like the ancient astronauts of the original short story in the Sentinel. I can't recall its name, I'm sorry. But he's, now a relic. He's a man from 2001. He's us, experiencing life in the 31st century. And he literally can't come down to Earth because, the gravity is just so different between like being revived in space and spending so much time in space that he ends up living on the space elevator on one of the levels, and he can only come down so far to one of the mezzanines because the gravity would, because his bones are so brittle from being in space for so long. And but it's just the interesting thing of bringing Frank Poole back from the dead to be us, to a Cipher, to live in this universe, and then to figure out things and the culture of the future too. It was like he had a romantic excursion with a beautiful woman on a moon base, and she was horrified when she found that he was circumcised, that he was butchered and she forgot he was a caveman, and that everyone was basically bald because everyone had this neural net placed under their skin scalp that gave them Bluetooth. Like we would say, they gave them Wi-Fi. And it was just built in. It was just a skull cap underneath your dermis. And everyone had them, but everyone was bald because of it. But people wore wigs. And that was just, I love these like little interesting cultural side notes. But the whole thing about turning me on to the space elevator, I love that. That's something that I enjoyed in Kim Stanley Robinson's book, and most especially in Mobile Suit Gundam 00, my favorite Gundam. And space elevators are of big importance. And that's me. As a sci-fi fan, it is, space elevators will be the way to get up there and stay up there. I'm hoping for the super strong materials that will give us that power to let us.
This is a family business.
You don't have to. Ads. But that's all I have for today. Thank you so much for tuning in this long if you stick around. But it's 3001, Space Odyssey by Arthur C. Clarke, his final book. And it's the fourth and final edition of his Odyssey books. And see what happens to Dave Hallman, I mean, well, Halman. Yeah, yeah. Dave. And because in 2010, he becomes united with Hal. Hal doesn't just sacrifice himself. Dave makes a copy of Hal. And so they become a composite being called Halman. And then basically by 2061, they do the same with Dr. Haywood Floyd. So Dr. Floyd is part of this group humanity that is expressed through the Star Child, and not just humanity, but also the artificial intelligence. So these evolved intelligences of Earth, are the ghost in the machine, one could say. And Frank Poole has a direct confrontation with Dave, and they say, "What are we doing? What do we do? Why is the story?" Yeah, stuff like that happens in 3001. But I'm mostly tuned into just like this brilliant science fiction writer, and the things he's making up that he sees in the future, and his probability amplitude. He sees these nuggets of technology and of culture and of wonder that will be commonplace in the 31st century, 100 years from now. And to think how far we've come in 100 years. So when I look at photographs from 1921 and look at publications from 1921, and just to see how far we've come. And it's a wonderful thing. And I'm a sci-fi fan, and that means I have hope in the future intrinsically. And that we're going to get up there. We're going to get to Mars. We're going to put a base on the moon. It's going to happen. We're going to mine the asteroids. We're going to build that space elevator here and on Mars. And maybe one on... would we need a space elevator on Moon? I don't know. That would be an interesting idea. I mean... it's just, you needed so much propellant to get off the moon. Why waste it? I'm just thinking out loud. Thank you so very much for tuning in. And give me a thumbs up if you like this kind of material. Give me a thumbs down if you didn't. Leave a comment in the comment section or a question. I'll read them on air. Sure, why not? Have you read 3001 Final Odyssey? Have you read all the Odyssey series books? Are you a fan of the movies? Do you have a crush on Helen Mirren as well? Excalibur, Caligula, the cook, the thief, his wife and her lover. I got fired from the video store for bringing that home. That's a story for another day. And I would love to earn your subscription. And so please, I make cooking videos. I want to give you delicious, nutritious, and beautiful home cooking hacks of a restaurant quality so you can show how much you love your loved ones with at the table. I'm an ordained minister, an amateur theologian. We say let's get spiritual here, and we often do. I love great coffee. You just keep grinding, okay? Keep it going. You're the hero of the story. You are. You got it. You got this. Thanks so much for tuning in. You cheers and have a great day. And read something. Leave me your picks in the comments.